call this meeting to order. Will staff please do roll call?
Luke Westalker,
Here.
Jessica Lemkool,
Here.
Morgan White,
Here.
Gabriel Dussard,
Here.
Andrew Stump.
Here.
We can now move on to approval of past minutes as distributed for the March 3rd, 2025 meeting. Are there any corrections? If not, can I get a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion to approve the minutes.
Is there a second?
I can second.
All in,
second.
all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. The minutes are approved. Okay, we now move on to public input. Does anyone in the audience want to speak? You can just come up to the mic. Yeah. Okay, so we can then move on to presentations. So we have a geothermal presentation by our very own Andy today.
Sorry?
You know, it's the worst is when you have it on a USB drive and you're using a computer that doesn't have a USB port. So I'm like, oh, I thought of everything.
Better? Yeah. Like Scott said, they already had a power hour on the March 26th, and there's another one in May. And the program is open to Champaign, Pike, and Vermilion County residents, businesses and farms and nonprofits. So really, it's a way of giving some rebates back to customers because we're going into a group buy program. There's more than one customer, so the company doing the installs can give rebates because of the assured number of installs that they will have. And there are some other rebates as well from the government. And so, like I said, the group buy, it's economy of scale. That's the benefit. You get some education out of it. And you can get a competitive contractor selection, which you've already done. So this is based on last year's information. So basically, there's tiered system. So every 25 installs, there's a rebate for the people that have got into the program. I'm not sure if that's the same price as this year or not.
It's a slightly lower starting per ton, and then a 100 ton discount at each tier.
And then there's the 30% federal credit, tax credit, and then could be a home improvement efficiency credit, and there could be other incentives as well. And not every install is the same, so you might need additional work done on the electrical system or the ductwork or other things. So each project is on its own kind of thing. So it may just be a simple plug and play kind of thing, and it may be more in depth than that. So it would be the same as the solar program. So this is a list of installs that Scott provided me. So you can see the first couple years was the most installs, and then last year we had a drop. Usually the typical install is 3 to 4 tons per house. So that equates to maybe 8 projects, 10 projects. And if you combine it with solar, then you can really get close to being net zero, and you get the benefit of both programs.
Are we aware of a reason for the drop in last year or anything of note?
Hard to say, can only speculate. It could be that, our communications weren't reaching new people. Could be that we soaked up folks who were sitting on the fence, and now we have that much harder work to do of educating people. I mean, a lot of people are, nobody's starting from zero on what solar panels do at this point, but most people are starting from zero on what geothermal heating and cooling is. So it's a lot more challenging. So it's hard to say whether this is a trend that's going to bounce back or not.
Could have been the number of drillers that were available, or was there?
So we've had in all the years we've had a lot of interest from folks who are willing and able, but they had a small lot that a traditional well rig could not get in the backyard. And we're working on developing relationships with the installers, working on developing relationships with drillers who have smaller rigs that can open up a few more sites. So that's a barrier we're working on.
Because I know there's the program in Chicago, they basically only had so many companies involved, and they basically weren't able to keep up with the demand, so they had to limit the number, at least the first year. So geothermal is really one of the most efficient heating and cooling systems available, because really you're spending much of your house payments on heating and cooling. So this is free energy in the ground, so you can reduce your energy bill by upwards of 50% likely with that, because you're doing heating and cooling with one mechanical system rather than 2, and it's efficient because the ground temperature is constant, so you're not trying to either increase the temperature and reduce the temperature with outdoor air that can change seasonally. So
do we have an idea of how many years it typically takes people in Urbana-Champaign to start saving money after the upwards cost?
Well, you're saving money on your power bill right away, but you probably mean a break-even point. Mm-hmm. Hard to say, but 10 years might be a good rule of thumb. What do you think, Andy? For a resident?
6 to 10 years.
6 to 10.
I think for my house, which was new construction, we estimated 10 years. But I should go back and check what was the electricity savings, because that was before the continuous increase in the cost of power, which means we're saving more even though our power bill went up. Math is weird. I wonder if it would be a little helpful if you could explain to folks who, because I remember I needed you to explain it to me the first time, just the loop on this picture with the 2 houses. Mm-hmm. Why? What does it mean to be free? What's really happening down there? I could do my version, and you could correct me, or you could do.
Go ahead.
So we put the liquid into a tube, that goes down underground, and as soon as it's below the freeze-thaw line, the temperature of the ground is consistently 55 here degrees Fahrenheit. And then you just leave the water, it's water, maybe some glycol, maybe occasionally something else, but usually it's water going through this tube, and it's just letting the energy out. It's either letting the cold get heated up from the underground just by like being there, like when you put your hand in water, right? It's just becoming room temperature. It's becoming ground temperature by waiting down there. So it's pumping through this area, and then it comes back to the house and the heat pump, and when it gets back, it's always 55 degrees, and it's a liquid. So then the heat pump has to change it to either 70 degrees because you want it warmer, or like it pulls the heat back out of it with the moving it into the household temperature, and then it goes around again. But once it's just the cost of moving the water that you're paying for, but you're getting that 55 degrees. And there's this really cool thing about air conditioning. You're trying to go from like 100 degrees and it's all humid, and you're trying to use air the air conditioner is moving air to make it more comfortable. But if you're using the heat pump, it's instead of going from 100 to 70, it's going from 55 to 70, but it's using the water heat exchange, which is much more, it's like 4 times more efficient to use liquid than air. And think about when it's really cold, if it's like -2 degrees outside, instead of trying to heat -2 degrees with a natural gas furnace in your house, burning that particulate inside, which is what most of us have, you get the geothermal heat pump just going from 55 up to 65 or 70 or whatever you want to keep it at. So I think it's awesome. I love it.
And because the ground is constant, the heat pump doesn't have to work as hard to meet the temperature you're trying to get at. So a lot of the heat pumps now you just turn them on, and you just set your endpoints, what you want your temperature to be in the summer and the winter, and it'll do it for you.
So it completely replaces traditional heat and air.
Yeah.
And one other question that I have is, just generally speaking, well, I guess I can kind of figure it out if it takes 10 years to pay it off. Like, what does it actually cost for the average house to get it put in? Do we have an average cost? Minus the 30% if you get that deal or whatever?
The overall installed cost really depends on the size of the house. But you're talking some tens of thousands of dollars. So, 3 or 4 tons a house times, 67, and let's just round it up to $7,000 a ton. With the ancillary things beyond just the basic per ton.
And then one other question I have with the air conditioning, like an air conditioner takes humidity out of the air, and how does...
It also dehumidifies.
Would this be feasible in pre-existing kind of denser neighborhoods like West Urbana to install, or is it kind of something reserved for newer developments because of insulation practice?
No, you can retrofit it to any heating and cooling system you have. Yeah, just lot size tends to be the issue with you need so much space between the water main, the water line, and the sewer line. So, and when we talk about geothermal, we're talking just about low temperature geothermal. We're not talking about volcanoes or anything like that. Just using heat pumps. And it's not a new technology. It's first invented, or first was put in practice in the 1940s in Ohio. And so it's been around for 80 years, 85 years. So, and now the new systems are automated, and you can actually make hot water with them as well. So when it's making cool in your house, you can use the heat that's generated from that process and make hot water. So it's basically free in that sense. That's a byproduct of that process.
Like you're saying you would hook it to your water system, like showers or what?
Well, here you've got this is a hot water heater. So it can be directly connected to the heat pump.
Wow, wow.
It's not using the water that goes in your shower, it's just heating it.
Yeah.
I had
Right.
to think about that the first time.
Yeah, no, I was like, wow, this is really something. Okay.
It is really something, and you
But
know,
it is, yeah.
like the air conditioning unit in the backyard is the most annoying thing in the
So
world to
loud.
me, and there isn't one.
So nice.
Just don't need it.
Yeah.
And 30% tax credit until like 2035 at least is the current law.
32, I think.
32.
And geothermal heat pumps are more efficient than other types of heating and cooling systems. So you can see the graph here. The geothermal are the green bars versus other heat pumps or natural gas or propane. And so the Earth really acts as a battery. It absorbs heat from the sun, and then that can be captured through these systems. And the Midwest in Illinois is a really good place to do this because of our climate. We've got cold winters, hot summers. We've got a really high groundwater table, and so it's easier to exchange heat in the ground when you have the conditions are saturated. So around in Illinois, the temperature below, say, 20 feet is between 50 and 58 degrees Fahrenheit. And then because we have such a large temperature range, you're always trying to heat and cool something. So that's a good candidate for the system because you're using it year round basically. And there are different types of systems. There's the boreholes, which are vertical, and they're closed loop, so the water just circulates through the system and doesn't leave the system. You can have horizontal closed loop systems where you just dig a trench 5 to 10 feet deep and you just put the pipes in the trench. You can also put the heat exchanger in a pond, so you can use the pond as the source of your heating and cooling. Or you can have open systems where you actually have a loop that's you're pumping water out of the aquifer and you're taking the energy off the water and then you're returning the water back to the same aquifer. The most common is probably the vertical or the horizontal closed loops.
Have we had people do like the pond and aquifer in Urbana? Have we had people have like the pond or aquifer installation in Urbana?
Not that I know of.
Does pretty much everyone do the vertical in Urbana? Like that's what everyone's doing?
Yes.
We don't have the aquifer in Urbana to be able to do open loop, but
If you had 20 acres outside of town, you could do horizontal 5 feet down or 8 feet down or whatever.
We have one example of the horizontal on campus that's at the small solar decathlon house. It's actually on South Race Street, right, or Race Street. And that one I think is pretty cool because it's a cheaper way to do an installation with the horizontal because you're not bringing in a drill rig. And a lot of the cost is the drilling. But it's limited in how much space, like you were talking about, if you had 20 acres in the country. But this picture with the coils in the corner here that says it's above the explore the data.
mm-hmm.
That's sort of what, you dig up your whole yard, put these coils in, or loops.
it'd be a straight line too. You basically need the same distance going in the ground versus on the horizontal. So if you're going collectively 500 feet in the ground with 3 boreholes or whatever, you need that same amount on the horizontal or even a little bit more. Those systems are not as efficient because you're getting impacted by the seasonal changes. So that goes down to like around 20 feet or so. So
Right.
you're going to get the ground heating up and cooling.
That would that makes sense. How difficult, like how commonly do they break? And how difficult is it to fix them? Like, do they have to maintenance or like?
There's been very, very few systems that have not worked well. Most of the piping is rated to be 30 years warranty, but a lot of systems have not are still working, so we don't even know what the lifespan is. So a lot of times it's the above ground part that wears out first, like the heat pump, so. So this is
My
basically,
understanding is a heat pump has about the same life as a furnace. Like the machine inside my basement would have to be replaced when a furnace would, or maintained similarly.
so this is what Morgan was talking about, the circulating the water. And the only reason they use glycol in the water mixture is to keep the water from not freezing when it's in the trenches that go into the house, because it's just below the frost line, but you don't want it to freeze. And this is another example of the heating and cooling process. So you're basically pulling heat of the house in the summer and bringing the heat up in the winter. So you're just really just working with the hot part of it and just moving it around. And you're trying to get till you're 70 degrees or 72 degrees in the house or the buildings. And so it's really efficient because you're putting 1 unit of energy in and you're getting 3 units of energy out. So it's 3 to 500% efficient, where a furnace is less than 100%. It works around the clock, so it works 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So you're not dependent on the sun shining or the wind blowing, comparing it to solar or wind energy. It's environmentally friendly because you're reducing the amount of energy you need to run the system, and you're not burning any fossil fuels. And land area, you can put it in other parking lots, you can put it under parking fields or whatever, so it's hidden below ground, and you can use the land surface above for other purposes.
Is it, could it be impacted by like blackouts or no? The
Well,
pump probably requires electricity from the regular
Yeah,
grid.
you need a little bit of electricity to run the
Gotcha.
pump, but you could run that off a battery, I imagine.
Cool.
And because it's out below ground, it's not affected by any weather hazards or anything, so there's instances where tornadoes go through and you can actually start running your system right after it, So Scott asked me to comment on a couple of projects we're working on campus. So Morgan, I was just trying to say this, that the other horizontal loop system on campus is at the Fruit Farm. And that was actually the first geothermal system on campus.
And before that, or around the same time, was Allerton has
Yeah.
some, is that horizontal also?
I think one of them
I
is.
saw a picture that looked like this, so I thought it was horizontal. One of the small buildings at Allerton, the
Gatehouse?
Evergreen Lodge, and they've done 2 or 3 buildings there now. But they're the smaller ones, not the mansion, yet.
So this is one project we're working on. We've buried a battery. So basically it's a plastic tank. It's 20 feet deep, 20 feet long, and we filled it with water, and we're sort of using it to store thermal energy. And we've combined it with the boreholes, normal boreholes. And we're actually seeing that we can run just one borehole on with the battery by itself. Which installing the battery part of it was much less expensive than drilling a hole. So there's,
How deep is the one borehole that's associated with the tank?
this is 120 feet, so a typical install.
Yeah. And so you've replaced, what, 2 boreholes with 1 tank?
In this instance, but we're thinking it's around 1 ton capacity, the tank, so we just haven't needed to use.
Could you, if you had a 3-ton system, could you have 3 tanks?
You could have 3 tanks, yeah. And the benefit of that is usually the drillers for that type of hole, they bill by the day, so you can drill probably 6 a day.
So it's still a drill, it's not a backhoe?
No, it's a auger system. The company that did this work, they drill water release wells, But there's also companies that do caissons for bridges, so it'd be the same type of hole.
How deep is the tank placed?
So the tank is just below the frost line, the top of it, and it goes down 20 feet from there.
So if someone was drilling, say, in the northern part of the state, where it gets really slow going because of bedrock, this would be particularly advantageous for them.
Yeah, these systems don't, I don't know if they, how good it is to drill through bedrock.
Well, you wouldn't have to,
Yeah.
is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Provided the bedrock is more than 20 feet below or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, so you save that part of the drilling. But we just had this start running in May last year, or this last year, so, or this year, so we'll be seeing.
So what is the benefit of this? Because you're having more energetic loss, because you're heating things, putting it in the battery, and I'm assuming there's loss there. So is it like the speed at which you can heat things up if you have this reservoir of heat?
Easier to exchange heat with water than it is ground.
Okay.
So you can exchange more energy in the water than you would running the same speed through the loops in the ground.
Are you heating up the water when you put it in the battery, or are you just having this battery full of ground temperature water?
No, we're heating it, whatever temperature is coming out of the building so
Okay.
it's heating that water, either heating or cooling the water, depending on.
Okay.
Those.
Is there an optimal latitude or ground temperature for geothermal? Like, I know you said that here in Illinois, in central Illinois, it's 55, which is a pretty good temperature, but ideally, is it a bit higher or lower? Or, like, where's the ideal latitude in the U.S. to build it?
Typically, if you have groundwater and then if you have the contrast in temperature, but I mean, there are systems in Florida, there are systems in Minnesota, so it's, you'll just be doing more cooling or heating. We're here, it's not 50-50, but it's relatively similar.
Minnesota is about 40 degrees and stuff, so it evens out because it's colder outside, but then you have a little more heat.
Andy, have you presented this at the state conference?
Yeah, it was presented
Okay,
2 weeks ago.
okay, great.
And then the second project we're working on is a community or neighborhood geothermal system in Chicago, in the West Woodlawn neighborhood. And so we're looking at connecting 100 buildings together and using the resource between all the buildings. And these neighborhoods, they're existing buildings, so you're retrofitting the system to different types of heating and cooling systems. So that's been a challenge. And then the benefit of this project is we can use the alleyways as the corridors for the piping, and we don't have to deal with the utilities, which are on the street side. And the city owns the alleyways, so that's another benefit.
Is it more efficient when hooking them up, or is it just like better for installation and drilling?
It's more efficient because you're using the resource between buildings, and so you don't have to have as many boreholes per house because you're sharing the resource. So I would say in the long term, it's more efficient to have more buildings connected than it is just to do building by building.
That's just generally better to do district energy systems. We have district heating and cooling on campus, and I'm very excited to see how well this geothermal district system works, because that's where we really, like that should be our reach goal for our town, is let's get a district geothermal heating system somewhere in Urbana or throughout all of Urbana.
It's more energy efficient, but whether financially it pans out is to be determined.
Yeah, because there's not been, at this scale, I guess the Framingham, Massachusetts project is the first one that it's been built out in a neighborhood.
When was that done?
Just started this year.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's the first one in the U.S., though. There
Yeah, first one in the US.
other countries that do it. And it's also unusual for a neighborhood to have like shared energy. Like if we all had our own homes and we're sharing the energy costs, and it's hard enough when two people share a roof and are like a duplex where it's one roof, like we have to learn how to share.
Well, I don't know that it's that much different than, say, sharing the natural gas that goes down the pipes. It takes a turn towards your house and it's metered at that point. I suppose this could be similar or the same.
Yeah.
But then there's a company that has to own that and maintain that and get paid.
So what we need to do, so it sounds like is we need to get Ameren to become the utility or something similar.
That was my next slide.
No, sorry.
So Thermal Energy Networks is this new type of utility, basically, and so there's a company that sells, or utility that sells thermal energy in a looper system. So in Illinois, they've passed legislation to do this, and they're in the pilot stage of building it out, making examples of this, so they can be a long-term program for thermal energy networks. But New York State is the leader in this type of system. They've got lots of projects going. And then the final area of research we're looking at is data centers. So data centers are a huge resource, need a huge water and energy resources to cool and run. And so a lot of the heat is wasted from these buildings, or complexes. So why don't you use these to distribute the thermal energy around to the adjoining communities, and use geothermal to be the source of the cooling, so you can save water and energy at the same time.
So for a data center, they'd be getting some cooling during the cooling season. Is there, what could be in the heating season that they're just trying to get rid of heat?
Yeah, so they're always trying to get rid of heat.
Oh, year round they're trying to get
Yeah.
rid of, because they generate so much heat. So during the cooling season, is there anyone that could use that heat?
Industrial processes that need heat, yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be not just homes, but it could be
They'd have to be
industrial
close.
users. Yeah, you don't want to be moving heat around for miles and miles.
Yeah.
Yeah. You want to strategically, I guess, plan a data center
Yeah.
in an area that you need.
But if the data center thought that they could get paid for that heat, then that might pencil out.
Yeah.
They might choose to locate next to some industrial use.
Especially where the existing energy resources and the water resources are limited, so. And I just read some things down here about how much energy is used at a data center, so it's staggering.
Do we have,
I guess, then this is old information.
Yeah.
So this is from last year, so.
do we have any locally around Urbana-Champaign that we know about? Yeah,
Data centers?
yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah. They've been the developers have paired them with solar installations, the ones that I'm aware of.
Okay.
But, that takes more land than wells that are underground.
But it's solar for running all the electronics.
And the
then,
cooling.
And the cooling, okay.
Oh, and then the program has some outreach. So there's a Facebook page and a page on the city's website for the program. There's advertisements going out for the power hours. And this is the next power hours, May 20th. That's it for me. Any questions?
For the shared community uses, would one neighbor using a ton of heating or cooling drastically affect other neighbors? Or is there any chance of heating up the ground temperature around the bores? Or if they're far enough apart, does that not really matter?
Yeah, they would have to be, typically you have them 20 feet apart, it could be 10 feet apart. You want to kind of plan all this out beforehand and know each building's energy profile So you need to know, like, okay, how many boreholes do we need in this part of the network versus other places? So it could be, you're often on a grid, or they're on like some kind of pattern, but there might be more in one place if the building use is larger.
Okay.
But yeah, you're sharing energy across the whole system. And I'm sure the systems can like know where there's more need at one time of another, so they can modulate the flow accordingly, so.
Any other questions?
In a city like New York, where there's kind of subways running all the time and already massive amounts of heat being generated underground, as well as kind of all this other metal and things underground, is this feasible because there's not enough places for the heat to diffuse to, or is it able to be implemented somewhere that the underground is already very busy? Like I know Chicago, but like even Chicago's a little bit less dense, but like if you wanted to serve, apartments or buildings in downtown Manhattan, is that implementable there, or would you have to dig even deeper?
Yeah, there in New York City or New York State, they have regulations now, they can go 800 feet with a borehole. But they have examples like in Brooklyn for apartment buildings, they're installing geothermal. Just because they can go deeper because they're regulated. Because the deeper you can go with one borehole, the less boreholes you need. So if there's a space restriction, the deeper you can go, the easier it will be to put them in.
But what about the impacts to the land? Like we have the district steam system has, it heats the sidewalks. So the sidewalks that happen to be right on top of the steam tunnels on campus are usually less icy and snowy than the other sidewalks, or they get snow accumulation later because there's a steam tunnel right underneath it. And you have some thermal tracking of some of the boreholes on campus. Are we seeing an impact to the soil, or is that being tracked also? I don't know yet.
Well, the one at the KIF, we can
Campus
track
instructional
the
facility.
temperature continuously, and so we were able to track when they were putting more heat in the ground last summer. We were able to track that increase in the temperature. And then when they stopped doing that, it seemed like the last measurement we took was the temperature was lower in that same interval. It wasn't all the way down that it was increasing, but just in a certain zone where the groundwater flow was occurring.
So it does make some difference.
But basically, urban areas do impact the ground temperature. They do increase the ground temperature to what naturally should be.
And then it still works, even if the temperature underground is a little higher.
Yeah, it's warmer at the surface, and then it cools off and then increases again.
Are there any like negative impacts to just poking all these holes, like if a whole community did it, could that have like downsides to the integrity of the ground, or?
And on the scale we're looking at, you don't want to have your systems too close to each other, so there has to be some planning of the resource, but typically they're far enough apart that they're not causing issues.
Cool. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So the last thing on the agenda today is discussion of Sustainability Advisory Commission's role. So Scott has attached on our packet our bylaws, and then also the ordinance establishing SAC. So this has come up at a few past meetings. So now that we've basically sent the mayor and city council some of our recommendations, are there other things we can do or other things we can focus on this year, or things that we want to learn more about and speakers we can invite and stuff like that? So in the bylaws, for example, some of the things, other duties of SAC include creating a public space for public engagement to give feedback and hear concerns, and then review and make recommendations about sustainability issues that impact city, seek relationships and partnerships within the community, develop and host educational and public outreach events, and support the city in seeking internal and external resources. So I think there's a lot of stuff in our bylaw that would allow us to take additional action if we want to pursue something specific. So does anyone have any initiatives we might want to pursue over the next year, or events we could host or speakers we could bring in? I know in the past we've talked about the street lights, getting those, maybe getting someone to talk about those at some point, but I don't know if there have been any updates over the last 6 months.
I don't know, but I can ask.
Something I've just been curious about, and I don't know who's doing this, the Save the Trees. I don't know if anyone's noticed those few like kind of mural paintings that are sitting out. There's like signage. And I think it connects back to the pesticides that were found on the trees throughout the city. I would love to learn more about that or have someone present on that.
I'd like it if we add public input at the end also, because like the folks who were here, we just had this nice presentation, it shared a lot of things, but there's no opportunity then afterwards. So if we could just always have that second sort of towards the end.
I agree
Questions,
with that.
comments.
Yeah,
Yeah.
fully agree. Are we kind of like brainstorming, or are we thinking about like things that we would really want to do? That's the goal of this conversation right now.
I think a little of both,
Both,
yeah.
yeah. I think it feels like we're kind of a relatively unknown entity, so I don't know if do we need to have something that we do every year that does a giving back and then also like kind of forms those relationships with the community a little bit? Because it feels like, yeah, I don't think it's a well-known.
Does the city still do neighborhood nights? For a while, they were doing that in parks.
They had stuff last
The
summer.
Park District organizes that, and the city often participated with a table.
Oh, but it was from the Park District.
I presume that'll happen again this summer.
Yeah, they had like those music series, like every different park every Wednesday, I think it was,
Yeah.
last summer. Those were really cool.
It might be nice if we could get like like a flyer about some main sustainability things like, did you know that we are a very sustainable community? We have this amazing recycling system, and we have these two, like, not only does there solar power through the Solar Urbana Champaign, but we're doing the next step that most people haven't even learned about. You can be on the cutting edge of something that was created 80 years ago, or 150 years ago, geothermal, and solar and wind will only get you so far.
That would be a
Some
good
bullet
idea. I
points
mean, I
on,
think
like,
it's,
a flyer. I don't know if we even have an SAC flyer or a sustainability flyer. We have the website for the commission, right? I don't know what our web presence is anymore. Just the commission page? Or is there a sustainability page on the,
There's sustainability information on the city website.
oh yeah.
In terms of flyers, most flyers sit in a or brochures, sit in a brochure presenter.
Well, and that's what I was thinking was like, if we make it into something with like a QR code and it's a bookmark. I love bookmarks, but we do a bookmark with a QR code and have either one of us available, or we work on getting some volunteers to go to some of the events.
I've also been seeing all the flyers about recycling everywhere online recently. So doing something like that, having city pages share them, those get shared in all the Facebook groups, and just, yeah, get something out there.
I do feel like if we were to do it at those music nights, it's a finite number of nights that we could kind of divide and just do like a couple. That I would be down for helping with that for sure.
Yeah.
Just to have some literature to share and just to let people know.
Like maybe it's not a handout, because that's always the question.
Yeah.
Right now, we're just creating waste, but it's it's in a plastic sheet
Right. Could be, yeah.
poster kind of thing. Of course, that takes time to develop.
Scott, are you still doing the rain barrel sales?
No, we discontinued that a few years ago. We didn't get any vendors to bid a few years ago, so we discontinued it.
Or your, what do you call it, the compost application on the lawn? Used to do that.
The Midwest Grows Green.
Yeah.
We did that for a couple. We did Midwest Grows Green with the Integrated Pest Management Institute for 2 or 3 years. And they moved on to other communities. Essentially, they got all they could here. What they were doing was promoting a natural lawn care approach, which is mow high, core aerate, and top dress with Landscape Recycling Center natural organic compost. So LRC still sells compost, usually sell out pretty at the end of the season. We're usually selling out at some point in the year. We are happy to make more compost if we can get more material. Most of the compost comes from leaf collection. In that process, the city purchased, or actually got a grant to purchase a top dresser specifically for natural compost, and they use that on city landscapes from time to time.
Did anything ever happen with that whole, speaking of compost, collection, like maybe trying out collecting from Schnucks and all of that Grace was talking about last year?
There was a food scrap composting pilot project. There was a private hauler that was collecting pre-consumer food scrap from a small number of commercial generators. And we received that and we composted it, but the hauler discontinued the service. I didn't talk to him about it. I didn't get a hold of him, but I presume it just wasn't financially feasible for them.
Would the new recycling hauler trust it? No.
They don't provide that service in this market, in the U.S., really. There is a vendor we've spoken with who is providing curbside residential food scrap collection in the Chicago area, and we've talked to them a couple of times and expressed the potential for using our site as a processing facility, at least in the short term. Their business model is they process it themselves, so they're aware of what our market looks like.
I think we should go through the list of priority actions that we gave to the council.
Can I bring up one other thing? So my friend helps with this food autonomy program in Carbondale, and they do a tree giveaway every year that is really cool. I don't know if that could be our thing that we do every year. I need to learn a lot more about it, but they just go and get all these tree saplings, and every year it's a set day, and they just give away trees, and people can donate if they want, and not if they don't. And I don't know, just throwing that out there is a thing that would be really great. Yeah.
I also have one thing to add. Some of my friends have kind of created their own nonprofit where they're building carbon sensors. And I think their ultimate goal is to kind of create a map of carbon levels across the CU area. And I know for a fact that they would definitely be thrilled to present here. So, I mean, if the council is interested in that, then that's something to explore.
Super cool.
Yeah, so I think the top thing on the resolution was about U-cycle and recycling stuff. So are there any ways that we can follow up on that and see if we can start getting incentivizing local businesses to recycle? Are there actions we can take to do that right now?
I think collecting some information about cities that have some sort of commercial recycling program would be helpful.
Okay. Could we have someone from U-cycle or the new vendor come in and talk at maybe one of the next meetings?
They are very busy
Okay.
with the start of the new contracts and new collection equipment, new collection staff, new collection methods. So in the short term, it's probably not feasible, but maybe in the longer term.
Okay. Okay, anything else? I'll also send a meeting or a message before the next meeting asking for additional agenda topics too, so.
Could we have kind of a standing question for if any of us have new ideas for a little bit in our agendas? So like this question, I think
Yeah.
having it just be like, okay, are there any new ideas of things we ought to be doing?
Okay.
I mean, it might be that we don't have them every time, but I think the question coming up regularly would help us sort of capitalize on the new things that are out there, right?
Can we just keep this in unfinished business as an agenda topic and then do that?
I think that makes sense.
And then are there any comments from the audience about things you'd want us to pursue? Any thoughts? Yeah. Or you can walk up and use the mic if you want.
It's nice if you don't mind using the mic, because then people can hear you later on the video on YouTube. Thank you.
I had a couple questions. My first one was, I really liked your guys' idea about asking for kind of like promotion. I do agree that this is not a very known resource on campus. I only know of it due to one of my classes. One of my professors actually was on the council, Professor Alfred, I believe, I'm sorry. And this is really cool, actually. I'm sorry. I really did enjoy the conversation. I think utilizing the university as a resource is like your biggest one, you know. Working with the students to advertise this, maybe taking a different perspective and approach on advertising this resource. It's a very helpful resource. You guys touched on a lot of topics that we touched on in class, and we had kind of like a eureka moment back there. Another question that I had was regarding the geothermal. So I'm actually from the city. I wondered, we kind of touched on what that would, like the shared energy would look like in the neighborhood idea. I guess my question is, in like a complex, say, let's say tenant A on the second floor is using a bit more heating than tenant B on the first floor, or vice versa. What does that look like? Does the whole house bill go up and then it's split differently, or because it's metered, would tenant A pay more?
Yeah, each heat pump, assuming there'll be a heat pump in each home or each apartment, so that could be metered.
Okay.
Usually there's examples in cities with condominiums where there's someone that company or the company that runs the system and bills the residents for the use. So there's really just like a utility inside of the condominium complex. And they just, they run it like a utility. So if you use so much energy, you charge that, so.
Okay. That was it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Thank you. Just somebody who is not a homeowner. I'm just doing this from a school project. It would be a little bit beneficial to us who don't own homes, who have the dreams and aspirations of owning a home in the future, if we could possibly get numbers, like what it is cost to currently install one of these systems, because you mentioned a rough estimate, sir, per ton, but I don't know what that means or how it's calculated. I don't know how much an AC unit costs. I don't know how much the repairs cost on an AC unit. I have a general idea, but I just pay what my landlord tells me to pay, so I don't know what those associated costs are, and if they decided to put in one of these units, how it's going to affect my rent. So maybe like a little visual helping us understand these costs more. I know this is meaning for you guys, but yeah, thank you.
I agree. I think that's very helpful. Yeah.
I know we have a youth seat here. That's what I am, but I mean, kind of like going a bit further on that U of I connection, maybe the council could consider having a U of I student seat. I don't know if that's a thing or not, but kind of like to maintain a connection to campus. Maybe that's an idea. Because there are, a lot of programs on campus. I know, like, I've worked with SECS as well, and they do a lot of stuff. So maybe, I don't know, it's something worth exploring.
It's a great idea, I think. Yeah. Is that something that we can just add, or is there like rules about that, or?
I think that may require a council action. We'd have to look.
I mean, we do have vacancies, so we could just accept a student. Yeah.
Maybe just creating a framework so that it's like specific
Yeah,
for
okay.
students might help, right? Because
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'm currently a member of Students for Environmental Concerns and personally know the members of the executive board as well as executive board members of the Illini Dems. It's not really my position to offer any sort of relationship with them, but I can talk to them about it if you guys would be interested. I know students in general are good for just raw manpower. These are people who volunteer their time to go. I've gone canvassing door to door for mayoral elections, other things, and just, yeah, it's a lot of raw power. Typically students are willing to do it as long as the cause matters to them, and their SECS is very large, so, but yeah.
Your group actually came to my school last year for our Earth Month celebration, and they were awesome, so thank you.
Yeah,
It's really-
my roommate presented at that actually, so.
That's awesome. That was really engaging for the kids, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I guess I'm just thinking, would we actually ask to add a student member? Would they need to live, like to add a eighth member And would they need to live in, or on the Urbana side to be on the commission? I don't know, I think that's, I mean, that's how it is for if they're voting members, they do. And then, you know, how do we do like a vetting process each August? I'm just trying to think through the process there. You know, there's SECS, there's SSLC, there's SSC, there's ISSC. There's a lot of different groups. There's, you know, Solar Decathlon, the Red Bison, there's so many. And then there's the student government. So I think it does become a bit of a question of how does it work? Maybe, you know, and then is there a responsibility of like connecting back with other student groups? So sort of thinking through that, we should put that on the, you know, on the agenda.
Yeah. Yeah, Scott, would you be able to look into some of the logistics of how that might work? And then we can circle back next month. Because we currently have 4 of the 7 official members, right? Okay.
I think it's a fair point that we have you know, we don't have insufficient numbers of seats. We have insufficient numbers of bodies. So something to consider.
There's a set of applicants to be on the seats that have been pending. I assume that the mayor has decided to let the next mayor do the review. We didn't hear a yay or nay for my daughter who applied.
Okay.
I think there's still some people in queue.
Gotcha.
Waiting for the time.
Okay.
I don't know waiting for what, but waiting.
Anything else? Okay, then I can adjourn the meeting. Thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks for all your
Yeah,
comments.
thank you.